The snow had stopped feeling cold somewhere around step 300, and Gwendolyn Pierce counted 462 before her knees buckled at the gate. She did not remember falling. One moment, the iron bars rose before her like black teeth against the white sky, and the next, the world tilted sideways, and the stone beneath her cheek burned colder than anything she had ever known. Her lips moved around 463, but no sound came out. 3 days. 3 days through the mountains in winter, following a road that existed only as a rumor, because the dead of the gate was older than any living memory, and she had nothing left to bargain with except her willingness to die, proving it still mattered. Footsteps, not hers. She could not feel her feet anymore. "Gate Warden." The voice was quiet, a man's voice, each word measured and deliberate. "Mark the ledger." "Your Majesty." A different voice, older, disbelieving. "The gate has not been crossed on foot in market." Hands slid beneath her, lifting her as though she weighed nothing at all. Gwendolyn tried to open her eyes, but her lashes had frozen together. The arms that held her were solid and bitterly cold even through her layers of wool and fur. And she thought distantly that she must be dying, because the cold had stopped hurting and started feeling almost warm. Frostbite on the extremities, core temperature dangerously low. The quiet voice again, closer now, vibrating through the chest her cheek rested against. "Send for Mircea. Tell him to prepare the solar chambers and bring warmed blood, type universal, and heated water, not boiling, blankets, and find out who she is." "She has not given her petition, Your Majesty. The debt cannot be invoked until—" She crossed the Widow's Walk in winter and reached the gate alive. "The debt is already invoked. Mark the damned ledger and send for Mircea." The world dissolved into motion and darkness. Gwendolyn felt herself being carried through space, heard the groan of hinges and the whisper of fabric, felt the temperature shift from the killing cold of outside to the merely frigid air of stone corridors. She tried to speak, to tell them about Oliver, but her jaw would not unlock. "Stay with me." The voice was directly above her now, and she felt a hand brush across her forehead, pushing back the hood that had frozen to her hair. "You did not walk 3 days through hell to die on my threshold. Stay with me." She wanted to tell him that she had not planned to die at all, that dying would defeat the entire purpose, but the darkness folded over her like a blanket and she fell into it without fear. When consciousness returned, it came in pieces. Warmth first, blessed and overwhelming, seeping into her from all sides. Then pain, bright and clarifying, shooting through her fingers and toes as frozen flesh remembered what it meant to live. Then voices. Complete madness. The dead of the gate has not been honored in over a century, not in any real sense. To invoke it now, over some peasant girl, the law does not stop being law because we find it inconvenient. The same quiet voice from before, patient and immovable. She fulfilled the terms. She walked the widow's walk and survived to reach the gate. Whatever she asks, if it is within our power to grant, we are bound by oath to grant it. Drackle, be reasonable. We do not even know what she wants. Then we will ask her when she wakes. And if she asks for gold, for title, for immortality itself, then we will explain what we can and cannot give, and if her request falls within the bounds of the debt, we will grant it. This is not a debate, Soren. The law is the law. Gwendolyn opened her eyes. The ceiling above her was vaulted stone, pale gray and ribbed with darker beams that might have been wood or might have been something else. Firelight danced across it, warm and golden, and when she turned her head she saw the source, a fireplace large enough to stand in, roaring with flame. She was lying on something soft, wrapped in blankets that felt like silk, and her hands and feet were bundled in cloth that smelled of herbs. She is awake. The quiet voice again, and this time she could attach it to a face. He was sitting in a chair beside her bed, or perhaps it was a couch, she could not quite tell where she was, and he was the most striking person Gwendolyn had ever seen. White hair fell past his shoulders, straight and fine as spider silk, and his skin was the bloodless pale of marble, smooth and cold-looking even in the firelight. His eyes were dark, so dark they looked black, and they were watching her with an intensity that made her want to look away. He was beautiful, the way a sword was beautiful. All clean lines and barely leashed danger, and he wore his authority like other men wore cloaks. "You are in the castle," he said, his voice the same measured calm she remembered from outside. "You have been unconscious for 6 hours. The frostbite is not severe, but you will have pain in your fingers and toes for several days. Drink this." He lifted a cup from the table beside him and held it out. Gwendolyn tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Every muscle in her body screamed protest. The white-haired man rose smoothly and slid an arm behind her shoulders, supporting her weight as though it cost him nothing. His touch was cold but steady, and he held the cup to her lips with surprising gentleness. The liquid was warm and sweet, some kind of spiced wine, and it burned pleasantly down her throat. She drank half the cup before pulling back, gasping. "Slowly," he said, and she could not tell if it was a command or advice. "You have not eaten in days. Too much too quickly will make you ill." "Oliver," she managed, her voice a ruined croak. "My brother. They took him." The white-haired man studied her for a long moment, then glanced to the side. Gwendolyn followed his gaze and saw another man standing near the fireplace, also white-haired and pale-skinned, but older-looking somehow, his face severe. Vampires, she realized with a clarity that should have been frightening, but instead felt simply factual. She had expected nothing else. "Tell me," the man holding her said, and it was not a request. So she did. The words came haltingly at first, her throat still raw from cold and disuse, but they came. She told them about Oliver, about her younger brother who had signed a contract with Baron Vasile 3 years ago to work as a blood servant in exchange for enough money to save their parents' farm, about how the contract was supposed to be for 2 years, but when the 2 years ended, Vasile claimed Oliver had incurred debts for housing and food and clothing, debts that would take another 5 years to work off. About how she had gone to the local magistrate and then to the regional court, and how both times she had been turned away with polite words and cold eyes. "They said it was a private contract," she said bitterly. "They said that if Oliver was not happy with the terms, he should not have signed, but he was 17 when he signed. He did not know what he was agreeing to, and now Vasile keeps him locked away, and we have not heard from him in 6 months. No letters, no visits. My parents think he is dead. I think I do not know what to think. But the debt of the gate is older than any baron's contract, and the law says that anyone who reaches the castle gate alive can ask for one thing, anything, and the vampire king must grant it if it is in his power. So I came to ask for my brother back." The silence that followed was heavy. The white-haired man lowered her carefully back against the cushions and set the cup aside. He did not let go of her hand. "What is your name?" he asked. "Gwendolyn Pierce." "Gwendolyn Pierce, I am Dracul Lucian, and yes, I am the king you walked 3 days to find. This is Soren, my cousin and advisor. Your petition is heard and acknowledged. The debt of the gate stands. I will bring your brother home." Relief hit her so hard she started to cry. She could not help it. 3 days of cold and fear and the bone-deep certainty that she was going to die before she ever reached the gate, and he was saying yes, just like that, as though it were simple. As though she had not just crossed the widow's walk in the dead of winter because it was the only hope she had left. Dracul Lucian did not tell her to stop crying. He simply held her hand and waited, his thumb moving in small circles against her wrist, and somehow that made it easier to breathe through. "You should not have survived that walk," he said quietly when her tears slowed. "The widow's walk is called that because it kills anyone foolish enough to try it in winter. You are either the bravest person I have ever met, or the most desperate." "Both," Gwendolyn said, wiping her eyes with her free hand. "Probably both." Something that might have been almost a smile crossed his face, gone too quickly to be sure. "Probably both," he agreed. "Rest now. I will send word to Vasile tonight. You will have your brother back within the week." "Just like that?" "Just like that." "Why?" The question came out sharper than she meant it to. "Everyone else I asked for help said it was too complicated, that they could not interfere with a private contract, that Vasile is a powerful man and has friends in the court. Why are you different?" Lucian looked at her with those impossibly dark eyes, and when he spoke his voice was colder than the wind outside. Because the debt of the gate is a law I swore to uphold, and a king who breaks his own laws is no king at all. Because Vasile is not the only baron who has been playing games with the blood servant contracts, and I am tired of pretending not to notice. And because you walked 3 days through a killing cold to stand at my gate and ask for justice, and that kind of courage should be rewarded, not dismissed. Is that reason enough? It was more than enough. Gwendolyn nodded, her throat too tight for words. Good. Now rest. Mircea will bring you food, and there are servants who will help you bathe and find clean clothes. You are my guest until this matter is resolved, and you will be treated as such. Do you understand? Yes. Thank you. I thank you. He inclined his head, a gesture of acknowledgement, and rose to leave. At the door he paused and looked back at her, and for a moment something unreadable crossed his face. 463 steps, he said. I heard you counting. Then he was gone, and Gwendolyn was left alone with the fire and the blankets and the slow, dawning realization that she had just bound the vampire king to an oath, and that whatever came next, her life would never be the same. The next 3 days passed in a strange, suspended dream. Gwendolyn healed quickly under the care of Mircea, who turned out to be the castle's physician and a vampire so old his white hair had started to take on a faintly silver sheen. He treated her frostbite with ointments that smelled of mint and honey, fed her broths and soft bread until her strength returned, and answered her questions with a dry humor that made her feel almost normal. You are the first person to invoke the debt of the gate in 213 years, he told her on the second day, unwrapping the bandages on her hands to check her fingers. The last was a merchant who had been robbed by a rival and wanted restitution. Before that, a mother whose child had been stolen by bandits. Before that, a soldier who wanted his name cleared of treason. The debt is old magic, older than the current bloodlines, and it binds the king absolutely. Dracul takes it very seriously. He said it had not been honored in over a century, Gwendolyn said, flexing her fingers carefully. The pain had faded to a dull ache, and the color was coming back. Honored in the sense that someone tried to invoke it? No. That has not happened in my lifetime. But honored in the sense that the king would have granted it if asked? Yes. Dracul is many things, but he is not a man who breaks his word. What kind of man is he? Mircea gave her a long look, one eyebrow raised. That is a complicated question. I have time. The physician chuckled. So you do. Very well. Dracul Lucian is the 47th vampire king, and he has held the throne for 316 years. He is a just ruler, a fierce warrior, and a stubborn bastard who would rather burn the castle down around his ears than compromise on a matter of principle. He does not suffer fools, he does not forgive betrayal, and he does not make promises he cannot keep. If he told you he would bring your brother home, he will bring your brother home, even if it means going to war with every baron in the realm to do it. That seems like a lot of trouble for one person. It is not about you, Mircea said gently. It is about the law, and about the fact that the barons have been abusing the blood servant contracts for decades, and Dracul has been looking for an excuse to bring them to heel. You gave him that excuse. He should be thanking you, really. Gwendolyn thought about that as Mircea rebandaged her hands. She had imagined the vampire king as distant and cold, a figure of legend who would grant her petition out of duty and then forget she existed. She had not expected him to sit by her bedside, or to carry her inside himself, or to speak to her like she was a person rather than a problem to be solved. She saw him twice more during those 3 days. Once in the corridor outside her room, where he stopped to ask how she was healing and listened to her answer with the same focused attention he seemed to give everything. And once in the library, where she had gone to escape the suffocating luxury of her guest quarters and found him reading at a table by the window. I did not mean to intrude, she said, already backing toward the door. You are not intruding. Sit. It was not quite a command, but it was not quite not a command either. Gwendolyn sat, The library was enormous, all dark wood and towering shelves that stretched up into shadow, and the table where Dracul sat was covered in papers and ledgers. He was writing something, his handwriting neat and precise, and he did not look up as he spoke. "I sent word to Vasile 3 nights ago. He has not yet replied. That is unusual, but not unexpected. He will stall as long as he can, hoping I lose interest. I will not. What happens if he refuses? Then I go to his estate and retrieve your brother myself, but it will not come to that. Vasile is ambitious, not suicidal." Gwendolyn watched him write, the scratch of the pen loud in the quiet room. "May I ask you something?" "You may ask. I may not answer." "Why did you carry me inside yourself? You could have ordered the gate warden to do it, or anyone else." "Why you?" Dracul set down his pen and looked at her. In the daylight, or what passed for daylight in the castle, which was mostly clever arrangements of mirrors and lamps, his eyes were not quite black. They were a very dark brown, the color of earth after rain, and they were tired. "Because you walked 3 days through snow and ice to reach my gate, and the least I could do was carry you the last 30 feet. Because I am not so proud that I have forgotten what courage looks like. And because if I had left you lying in the snow while I debated protocol with the gate warden, you would have died, and the debt would have been void. Does that answer satisfy you?" "Yes," Gwendolyn said. "Thank you." "You thank me a great deal for a woman who is owed a debt. You could have let me die. You did not. That deserves thanks." Something shifted in his expression, too subtle to name. "You are an unusual woman, Gwendolyn Pierce. I nearly froze to death on your doorstep. I am not sure unusual is the word I would choose. Stubborn, then. Foolhardy. Brave. All of those sound better than desperate. Desperation is not shameful. It is what you do with it that matters. You could have stayed home and mourned your brother from a distance. Instead, you walked into the teeth of winter because you refused to give up on him. That is not desperation. That is love." The words hung between them, and Gwendolyn felt her throat tighten again. She looked down at her bandaged hands, not trusting herself to speak. "Your brother is lucky to have you," Dracul said quietly. Then he picked up his pen and returned to his work, and the moment passed. On the 4th day, Baron Vasile sent his reply. Gwendolyn was in the solar when Sorin arrived with the letter, his face grim. Dracul read it in silence, his expression growing colder with every line, and when he finished, he handed it to her without a word. The letter was polite, almost obsequious, and it made Gwendolyn's skin crawl. Vasile expressed his deepest regrets, but the contract with Oliver Pierce was binding and legal, signed in good faith by both parties. The young man had indeed incurred debts during his service, and those debts must be honored before he could be released. However, out of respect for His Majesty's concern, Vasile would be willing to reduce the remaining term of service from 5 years to 3, and to allow the young man to send letters home once a month. Surely that was a generous compromise. "He is stalling," Sorin said flatly. "And he is testing you. If you accept this, every baron in the realm will know the debt of the gate means nothing." "I am aware." Dracul's voice was ice. "Prepare the carriage. We leave at nightfall." "Your Majesty." "I am going to Vasile's estate, and I am bringing Oliver Pierce home. That is not a subject for debate." "Then I am coming with you." "No, you will stay here and manage the court. This should not take more than a few days, and I do not want the vultures circling in my absence." Sorin looked like he wanted to argue, but he only bowed and left. Dracul turned to Gwendolyn, who was still holding the letter, her hands shaking. "I will bring him home," he said, and there was a promise in his voice that was more binding than any law. "Packlight, you are coming with me." "What? Why?" "Because if I return with your brother, and you have not seen with your own eyes that he is whole and well, you will spend the rest of your life wondering if I brought back the right man. And because Vasile needs to see that the woman who invoked the debt is real, and that she did not do it lightly. And because you did not walk 3 days through hell to wait in a castle while someone else finishes the fight. You started this. You will see it through." Gwendolyn stared at him, her heart pounding. I do not know how to fight. You will not need to. I will handle Vasile. You just need to be there. And if he refuses? Dracul's smile was a terrible thing, all sharp edges and cold fury. Then he will learn that there are worse things than losing a servant. They left at nightfall, as promised. The carriage was black lacquered wood and silver filigree, pulled by 4 horses that looked too perfect to be real. Inside, the seats were upholstered in dark velvet, and the lamps burned with a steady golden light that did not flicker even as the carriage jolted over rough roads. Dracul sat across from her, silent and still, his hands folded in his lap and his gaze fixed on the window. Gwendolyn watched him, trying to reconcile the king who had carried her inside with the man who was now radiating barely leashed violence. He had changed into traveling clothes, all black leather and dark wool, and there was a sword at his side that she had not seen before. It was a plain weapon, no jewels or ornate metalwork, but the way he wore it suggested he knew how to use it. "How far is Vasile's estate?" she asked, more to break the silence than because she needed to know. 2 nights' travel. We will stop at an inn tomorrow to rest and arrive the following evening. Vasile will not be expecting us so soon. That is to our advantage. What will you say to him? As little as possible. Men like Vasile do not respond to reason. They respond to power. I will make it clear that refusing me is not an option, and he will comply. And if he does not? Dracul looked at her, and his eyes were very dark. Then I will take your brother by force, and Vasile will answer to the full court for breach of law. But it will not come to that. Vasile is a coward. He preys on the weak because it is easy. When faced with someone stronger, he will fold. Gwendolyn wanted to believe him, but the knot of fear in her chest would not loosen. You do not have to do this. You could just send soldiers or order him to comply. You do not have to go yourself. No, I do not. But I am going anyway. Why? He was silent for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was quieter than she had ever heard it. Because 300 years ago, I made a vow to uphold the laws of this realm and to protect those who could not protect themselves. For too long I have let the barons do as they pleased, telling myself that as long as they paid their tithes and kept the peace, their private cruelties were not my concern. I was wrong. You proved that. You walked 3 days through a storm that should have killed you, because you believed that the law still mattered, that justice was still possible. I will not let you be wrong about that. I will not let you have suffered for nothing. The words settled over her like a weight, and Gwendolyn realized with a start that this was not just about Oliver. This was about Dracul himself, about a king who had looked away for too long and was now trying to make amends. She wanted to tell him that he was not responsible for her suffering, that she had made her own choice, but the look on his face stopped her. He was carrying his own guilt, and nothing she said would lift it. So instead she said, "Thank you for taking me with you. I know I will only slow you down, but I need to see him. I need to know he is all right. You will not slow me down, and you have every right to be there. This is your fight as much as mine." The carriage rattled on through the dark, and Gwendolyn leaned her head against the window, watching the snow-covered landscape slide past. Somewhere out there, her brother was waiting, and she was going to bring him home. The inn they stopped at the next day was a squat stone building on the edge of a small village, the kind of place that catered to travelers who had no other choice. The innkeeper took one look at Dracul and went pale, bowing so low Gwendolyn thought he might fall over. "Your Majesty, we are honored. We had no word you were coming, please. The best rooms are yours. Anything you need. 2 rooms, meals sent up, and privacy. No one is to know we are here. Is that understood?" "Yes, Your Majesty, of course, absolutely. I will see to it myself." Dracul handed him a purse of coins, far more than the rooms were worth, and the innkeeper clutched it like a holy relic. They were shown upstairs to a pair of rooms that were clean if not luxurious, and Dracul checked both before nodding his approval. "Rest," he told Gwendolyn. "We leave at sunset. If you need anything, I am next door." She wanted to argue that she was not tired, but the truth was that the carriage ride had exhausted her more than she wanted to admit. Her body was still recovering from the walk, and the constant jolting over rough roads had left her sore and aching. So she nodded and went into her room, closing the door behind her. The bed was narrow but comfortable, and she lay down fully clothed, staring at the ceiling. She should have been thinking about Oliver, about what she would say to him when she saw him, but instead her thoughts kept circling back to Dracul, the way he had looked at her in the library, the way he had spoken about the law and justice and guilt, the way he had carried her inside when he could have left her to die. She did not know what to make of him. He was a king, ancient and powerful, and probably capable of things she could not even imagine, and yet he had sat by her bedside and held her hand while she cried. He had promised to bring her brother home, and she believed him, not because she had to, but because every instinct she had said that he was a man who kept his promises. It was a strange thing to trust someone so completely after knowing them for only a few days, but then she had trusted him enough to collapse at his gate. What was a little more trust on top of that? She must have fallen asleep, because the next thing she knew, someone was knocking on her door. Gwendolyn sat up, disoriented, and saw that the light outside the window had faded to dusk. "Come in," she called, and the door opened to reveal Dracul carrying a tray. "I brought food." The innkeeper was too nervous to send a servant. He set the tray on the small table by the window, and Gwendolyn saw bread, cheese, roasted meat, and a bowl of stew that smelled like heaven. Her stomach growled, and Dracul almost smiled. "Eat. We have another night of travel ahead, and I need you strong." Gwendolyn did not need to be told twice. She fell on the food with an enthusiasm that would have embarrassed her under other circumstances, but Dracul did not seem to mind. He sat in the chair across from her, watching her eat with that same focused attention, and after a while, she paused. "Are you not hungry?" "I fed before we left. I will not need to again for several days." She wanted to ask what he meant by fed, but she thought she already knew. Blood. He drank blood because he was a vampire, and that should have been horrifying, but instead, it was just another fact, like the color of his hair or the coldness of his skin. "Does it hurt?" she asked. When you feed." "Not if it is done correctly. A skilled feeder can make it pleasurable even, but that requires trust, and trust is not something that can be forced." "Is that what the blood servants do? Provide blood?" "Among other things. The contract is supposed to be mutually beneficial. The servant provides blood and service, and in return they receive protection, education, and a stipend. It is a position of honor, or it should be. But men like Vasile have corrupted it, turned it into little more than slavery. That ends now." There was steel in his voice, and Gwendolyn believed him. "What will happen to the other servants, the ones who are not my brother? If they wish to leave, they will be allowed to do so, and compensated for their time. If they wish to stay under new terms, they may. But the old contracts are void. I will make that very clear. Vasile will not like that. Vasile will learn to live with disappointment." Gwendolyn finished her meal in silence, and when she was done, Dracul took the tray and set it outside the door. Then he turned back to her, and for a moment he just looked at her, his expression unreadable. "You should know that tomorrow night may not go smoothly. Vasile is proud, and he will not surrender your brother without making a scene. I will do everything in my power to keep you safe. But if something goes wrong, I need you to promise me that you will do exactly as I say. Can you do that?" "Yes." "Good. Get some rest. We leave in an hour." He was halfway to the door when Gwendolyn called after him. "Dracul?" He paused, looking back. "Thank you for all of this. I know I keep saying it, but I mean it. You did not have to help me, and you did anyway. That means more than I can say." For a moment, something vulnerable crossed his face, and then it was gone, locked away behind that careful control. "You are welcome, Gwendolyn Pierce. Now rest." The second night of travel was quieter than the first. Gwendolyn dozed on and off, lulled by the rhythm of the carriage, and Dracul sat across from her like a statue, unmoving and silent. She wondered if he ever slept, or if sleep was something vampires did not need. They arrived at Vasile's estate just after midnight. It was a sprawling manor house, all stone and iron, surrounded by a high wall and lit by torches that burned with an eerie green flame. The gates were closed, but when the carriage pulled up, they swung open as if by magic, and a servant in dark livery hurried out to meet them. "His Majesty King Dracul Lucian," the servant said, bowing low. Baron Vasile was not expecting you, but he welcomes you to his home and asks that you join him in the main hall. Tell Vasile I am here for Oliver Pierce, and I will be leaving with him tonight. If he wishes to discuss the matter, he may do so now. If not, I will take the young man and go. The servant's eyes widened, but he bowed again and hurried back inside. Dracul climbed out of the carriage and turned to offer Gwendolyn his hand. His grip was cold and strong, and he did not let go as they walked through the gates and into the courtyard. The main hall was exactly the kind of ostentatious display Gwendolyn had expected. High ceilings, gilt furniture, tapestries that probably cost more than her family's farm. Baron Vasile was waiting for them, a tall, thin vampire with white hair pulled back in a severe knot and a smile that did not reach his eyes. Your Majesty, what an unexpected pleasure. If you had sent word, I would have prepared a proper welcome. I am not here for pleasantries, Vasile. Where is Oliver Pierce? The Baron's smile tightened. The young man is in the servants' quarters, where he has been for the past 3 years. As I said in my letter, his contract is binding, and he has debts that must be honored before. The contract is void. The debt of the gate supersedes all private agreements, and Gwendolyn Pierce invoked it 4 days ago. You will release Oliver Pierce into my custody immediately, or you will face charges before the full court for unlawful imprisonment and abuse of the blood servant laws. Choose quickly. Vasile's face went very still. You cannot be serious. The contract was signed in good faith. The contract was a lie, and you know it. You have been using the blood servant laws to enslave young men and women for decades, and I am done pretending not to see it. This ends tonight. Where is he? For a moment, Gwendolyn thought Vasile was going to refuse. She saw the calculation in his eyes, the weighing of options, and then she saw the fear. Dracul had not moved, had not even raised his voice, but the threat in the air was palpable, and Vasile was not stupid enough to ignore it. Very well, the Baron said stiffly. I will have him brought to you, but I want it noted that I am complying under protest and that I will be filing a formal complaint with the court. File whatever you like. Now bring him here. Vasile gestured to a servant who bowed and hurried away. The wait felt endless. Gwendolyn's heart was pounding so hard she thought everyone in the room must be able to hear it, and Dracul's hand was still around hers, his thumb tracing small, steady circles against her palm. She focused on that, on the cool solidity of his touch, and tried to breathe. And then the servant returned, and Oliver was with him. Gwendolyn's breath caught. Her brother looked older, thinner, his face gaunt and his eyes shadowed. But he was alive, and he was whole, and when he saw her his expression went from confusion to shock to something that might have been hope. Gwen? She pulled free of Dracul's hand and ran to him, throwing her arms around him and holding on like she would never let go. Oliver hugged her back, his grip almost painfully tight, and she felt him shaking. What are you doing here? He whispered. How did you? I walked the widow's walk. I invoked the debt of the gate. I came to bring you home. Oliver pulled back, staring at her. You what? Gwen, that is insane. You could have died. But I did not, and now you are free. The king himself is here to take you home. Oliver looked past her to where Dracul stood, and his face went pale. He dropped to one knee, bowing his head. Your Majesty, I thank you. I do not know what to say. You do not need to say anything, Dracul said quietly. Your sister said enough for both of you. Gather your things. We are leaving. Oliver hesitated, glancing at Vasile, and Gwendolyn felt a flicker of unease. What is it? She asked. I need to speak with you, privately. Dracul nodded. Take your time. Vasile and I have business to discuss. Gwendolyn followed Oliver out of the hall and into a small side room. As soon as the door closed behind them, Oliver turned to her, his face anguished. Gwen, I cannot leave. The words hit her like a physical blow. What? What are you talking about? The contract is void. The king himself said so. You are free to go. It is not about the contract. It is about... He ran a hand through his hair, looking miserable. There is someone. Here. Her name is Helena. She is another blood servant, and we are together. I cannot leave her." Gwendolyn stared at him. "Then bring her with you. The king said anyone who wants to leave can leave. He will protect. She does not want to leave. Her family is here, her whole life is here, and I love her, Gwen. I know you do not understand, but I love her, and I am not leaving without her, and she is not going anywhere. You have been here 3 years. You signed a contract that was supposed to be for 2. You are telling me you want to stay? Yes. I know it sounds crazy, but this is my home now. Helena and I are talking about getting married, about having a life together. I cannot just abandon that because you decided to walk across the mountains." The anger that flared in Gwendolyn's chest was so sudden and so fierce it took her breath away. "I nearly died for you. I walked 3 days through a blizzard because I thought you were being held prisoner, because I thought you needed me to save you, and you are telling me you do not want to be saved? I did not ask you to do that. I never asked you to risk your life for me. You are my brother. What was I supposed to do, just let Vasile keep you locked away? I am not locked away. I am happy here, Gwen. Why is that so hard for you to understand? Because it meant that she had been wrong. Because it meant that the whole walk, the whole desperate plan, had been for nothing. Because it meant that she had risked everything to save someone who did not need saving, and the humiliation of that was almost more than she could bear. But underneath the anger was something worse, the terrible suspicion that Oliver was right, that this had never really been about him at all, that some part of her had needed to do this, needed to prove that she could save him, that she was still useful, still important. And now that need was stripped bare and ugly, and she did not know what to do with it. "I am sorry," she said finally, her voice shaking. "I should have written first. I should have asked if you wanted to come home. I thought, I know what you thought, and I appreciate it, I do. But I am not the same person I was 3 years ago, and this is where I want to be. I am sorry you came all this way for nothing. It was not for nothing. The king is here now, and he is going to change the laws. Anyone who is being held against their will, anyone who was tricked into a contract like yours, they will be free. That has to count for something." Oliver nodded slowly. "It does, and I'm grateful, but I still cannot leave." Gwendolyn took a deep breath, forcing herself to calm down. "Can I meet her? Helena?" A smile broke across Oliver's face, the first real smile she had seen. "Yes, she's upstairs. I will bring her down." He left, and Gwendolyn sank into a chair, her mind spinning. This was not how it was supposed to go. She was supposed to bring Oliver home, triumphant and vindicated, and instead she was sitting in a baron's manor trying to come to terms with the fact that her brother had a whole life she knew nothing about. When Oliver returned, he had a young woman with him. Helena was small and dark-haired, with warm brown eyes and a shy smile. She curtsied to Gwendolyn, and when she spoke, her voice was soft. "It is an honor to meet you, Miss Pierce. Oliver has told me so much about you." "Has he?" Gwendolyn managed to smile. "He has not told me anything about you, but that is not your fault. It is nice to meet you." They talked for a while, awkward and careful, and Gwendolyn found herself liking Helena despite everything. She was kind and thoughtful, and the way she looked at Oliver made it clear that she loved him, and Oliver looked at her the same way, with a tenderness that made Gwendolyn's chest ache. Eventually, she excused herself and went back to the main hall. Dracul was waiting for her, standing by the fireplace with his arms crossed, and Vasile was nowhere to be seen. "He is gone," Dracul said. "I made my position clear, and he decided not to argue further. Where is your brother?" "He does not want to leave. He is in love with one of the other servants, and she wants to stay. So he is staying too." Dracul studied her for a long moment. "How do you feel about that?" "Like an idiot. Like I just walked 3 days through hell for nothing." "It was not for nothing. Vasile has agreed to release any servant who wishes to leave, and to renegotiate the terms of all existing contracts under the new laws. Your brother may be staying by choice, but there are others here who are not, and they will have their freedom because of you. That is not nothing." Gwendolyn wanted to believe him, but the disappointment was still too raw. "I thought I was saving him. I thought he needed me." Perhaps he did 3 years ago. People change. That does not mean your love for him was wasted. It feels wasted. Dracul crossed the room and stood in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. You walked the widow's walk because you believed your brother was suffering and you refused to let him suffer alone. That was an act of love, and love is never wasted, even when it is not needed in the way you expected. You gave him the choice to leave, and he chose to stay. That is his right, but it does not diminish what you did. You are being very kind for someone who just wasted 2 days dragging me across the country. I did not waste anything. I did what I said I would do. I brought you to your brother, and I ensured he was safe and free to choose his own path. The debt of the gate is fulfilled. What happens now is up to you. Gwendolyn looked up at him, this strange, solemn king who had carried her inside when she collapsed, who had promised to bring her brother home and kept that promise, even when it turned out to be more complicated than either of them expected. And she realized that she did not want to go back to her parents' farm, to the small, quiet life she had left behind. She did not know what she wanted, but she knew it was not that. "What do you mean, what happens now?" she asked. "I mean that the debt is fulfilled, but you are still my guest, and you are welcome to remain at the castle as long as you wish, or I can arrange for you to return home, with an escort and provisions for the journey. The choice is yours." Why would I stay at the castle? Because Vasile was not the only baron abusing the blood servant laws, and I will need someone to oversee the reforms. Someone who understands what is at stake, who will not be swayed by politics or intimidation, someone like you. Gwendolyn stared at him. "You want me to work for you? I want you to help me fix a broken system. The position of gate warden has been largely ceremonial for the past 2 centuries, but it does not have to be. The warden is meant to be the keeper of the debt, the one who ensures that it remains honored and accessible to those who need it. You prove that the debt still matters. I think you should be the one to protect it. I do not know the first thing about being a warden. You know how to survive impossible odds, and you know what it means to fight for someone you love. That is more than most people can say. The rest you can learn." It was insane. It was completely insane. And yet the more Gwendolyn thought about it, the more it felt right. She had spent her whole life on a farm, doing the same tasks over and over, and the only time she had ever felt truly alive was during those 3 days in the snow, when every step mattered and every breath was a victory. She did not want to go back to being invisible. "I will need time to think about it," she said. "Take all the time you need. We will leave for the castle in the morning. You can give me your answer when you are ready." They stayed the night at Vasile's estate, much to the baron's obvious displeasure, and left at first light. Oliver came to say goodbye, and Gwendolyn hugged him tightly, trying not to cry. "I am sorry I was angry," she said. "I am happy for you. Truly." "I know. And I am sorry I did not write more. I should have told you about Helena, about everything. I did not know how. Write to me now, please. I want to know how you are, what your life is like. I want to meet Helena properly when I am not so angry and confused." "Yes, that." Oliver grinned. "I will write, I promise. And Gwen, thank you for caring enough to walk through hell for me. Even if I did not need rescuing, it means everything that you tried. I love you, little brother. I love you too." The journey back to the castle was quieter than the journey out. Dracul seemed lost in thought, and Gwendolyn spent most of the time staring out the window, watching the landscape change from flat farmland to rolling hills to the jagged peaks of the mountains. She thought about Oliver, about Helena, about the choice Dracul had offered her. By the time they reached the castle, she had made her decision. "I will do it," she said as Dracul helped her out of the carriage. "I will be your gate warden if you still want me." He looked at her, and for the first time since she had met him, he smiled. It was a small smile, barely there, but it transformed his face, made him look younger and less distant. "I still want you. Welcome home, Warden Pierce." The months that followed were a blur of activity. Dracul was true to his word. He overhauled the blood servant laws, stripping the barons of their ability to trap people in endless contracts and establishing a new system of oversight and accountability. It was slow, frustrating work, and there were times when Gwendolyn wanted to scream at the sheer bureaucratic nonsense of it all. But Drackle was patient and relentless, and slowly, steadily, things began to change. Gwendolyn's role as gate warden turned out to be less ceremonial than she had expected. She spent her days reviewing petitions, meeting with people who had grievances against the vampire courts, and working with Drackle to ensure that the debt of the gate remained accessible and enforceable. It was hard work, but it was important work, and for the first time in her life, Gwendolyn felt like she was doing something that mattered. And through it all, Drackle was there. Not always visibly, he was still the king, and he had 1,000 other responsibilities, but she saw him more often than she expected. He would stop by her office to ask about a petition, or invite her to walk with him through the castle gardens, or simply appear in the library while she was working and sit across from her in companionable silence. She learned things about him: that he had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard, that he was fiercely protective of the people under his rule, even when they did not deserve it, that he had been alone for a very long time, and that loneliness had made him cautious about letting anyone close. She learned that he liked music but could not carry a tune to save his life, that he had a weakness for spiced wine and old books, that he was afraid of failing the people who depended on him, and that fear drove him harder than any ambition. And somewhere along the way, she realized that she was in love with him. It was a slow realization, creeping up on her in quiet moments. The way her heart jumped when she heard his voice in the corridor, the way she found herself looking for excuses to see him, the way his rare smiles felt like a gift meant only for her. She did not know what to do with it. He was a king, ancient and powerful, and she was just a farmer's daughter who had stumbled into his life by accident. There was no world in which this made sense. But then one night, 6 months after she had become gate warden, he came to her office and asked if she would walk with him. It was late, well past midnight, and the castle was quiet. They walked through the corridors in silence, and then he led her up a narrow staircase to a tower she had never seen before. The room at the top was small and circular, with windows on all sides that looked out over the mountains. The view was breathtaking, the snow-covered peaks silver in the moonlight, and Gwendolyn stood at the window and tried to find words. "I come here when I need to think," Drackle said quietly. "It is the highest point in the castle. On clear nights you can see for miles. It is beautiful." "Yes," he paused. "Gwendolyn, I need to tell you something." She turned to look at him, her heart pounding. He was standing very still, his hands clasped behind his back, and his expression was unreadable. "I have lived for over 300 years, he said. "I have seen empires rise and fall. I have loved and lost and learned to guard my heart, because the pain of losing someone is almost more than I can bear. And yet here I am, standing in front of you, about to do something profoundly stupid." "What are you talking about?" "I am talking about the fact that I am in love with you, and I have been for months, and I do not know what to do about it." Gwendolyn's breath caught. "You what?" "I know it is impossible. You are human, I am not. You have a life ahead of you, and I have centuries behind me, but I cannot stop thinking about you. I cannot stop wanting to be near you. And I hoped that perhaps you felt the same." She crossed the room in 3 strides and kissed him. His lips were cold, but they warmed under hers. And when he wrapped his arms around her and pulled her close, she felt like she was finally home. They broke apart, breathless, and Drackle rested his forehead against hers. "Is that a yes?" "That is a yes. I love you too. I have for a while now. I just did not think I did not know if you—" "I do, I have, I will." They stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, and Gwendolyn felt something settle in her chest, something warm and certain. This was where she was meant to be. Not on the farm, not in her old life, but here, with him. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we figure it out. Together. I am still human. I will not live as long as you. I know. And I will not ask you to change that unless you want to. But I will love you for as long as I have you. And that will have to be enough." It is enough. It is more than enough. Over the next year, the reforms continued. One by one, the barons who had been abusing the blood servant laws were brought to heel, their contracts voided, and their victims freed. Some left, grateful for their freedom. Others, like Oliver, chose to stay, renegotiating their terms under the new laws. Vasile was stripped of his title and exiled, a warning to anyone else who thought to challenge the king's authority. In his place, Dracul appointed a younger vampire who had spent decades advocating for the servants' rights, and the change was immediate and dramatic. Gwendolyn threw herself into her work as gate warden, and the role grew into something far more than ceremonial. She became the voice of the people who had no voice, the one who stood between the vulnerable and the powerful, and she was good at it. Dracul had been right. She knew what it meant to fight for someone you loved, and that made her fierce and unyielding in ways that terrified the barons and heartened the people. And through it all, she and Dracul built something together. It was not easy. He was still a king, with all the responsibilities that came with the crown, and she was still learning how to navigate the treacherous waters of vampire politics. But they made it work. He taught her to dance, badly and with much laughter. She taught him to appreciate the simple pleasures of a quiet morning and a good book. They argued about policy and law and the best way to handle stubborn barons, and they made up in the tower room with the view of the mountains. 2 years after Gwendolyn had collapsed at the castle gates, Dracul asked her to marry him. It was not a grand proposal, no flowers or speeches. They were in the library, going over a stack of petitions, and he simply looked up and said, "Marry me." Gwendolyn blinked. "What?" "Marry me. I know it is unconventional, and there will be those who disapprove, but I do not care. I want you by my side, not just as my warden, but as my partner. In all things. Will you marry me?" She set down the petition she had been reading and smiled. "Yes, of course, yes." The wedding was held in the spring, in the great hall of the castle, with Soren officiating and Mircea standing as witness. Oliver and Helena came, along with Gwendolyn's parents, who were still trying to wrap their heads around the idea that their daughter was marrying the vampire king. It was a strange, beautiful ceremony, blending human and vampire traditions, and when Dracul kissed her at the end of it, the entire hall erupted in applause. Gwendolyn laughed against his lips, dizzy with happiness, and he held her like she was the most precious thing in the world. The years that followed were good ones. The reforms took hold, and the blood servant system was transformed from a tool of oppression into a genuine partnership. The debt of the gate was invoked 3 more times during Gwendolyn's tenure as warden, and each time she ensured it was honored to the letter. She remained human, by choice. Dracul had offered her the option of turning, of joining him in immortality. But she had declined, not because she did not love him, but because she wanted to live her life fully, as herself, for as long as she had. He understood, and he did not push. They talked about the future, about what would happen when she aged and he did not, and they made their peace with it. He would have centuries after she was gone, and she would have the time they had together. It was not perfect, but it was real, and that was enough. 5 years after the wedding, Oliver and Helena had their first child, a daughter they named Petra. Gwendolyn held her niece for the first time and felt something shift in her chest, a longing she had not expected. "Do you want children?" Dracul asked her that night as they lay in bed together. "I do not know. I did not think I did, but now maybe. Do you? I have never sired a child in all my years. I do not know if it is even possible given what I am, but if you want to try, we can try." They did try, and to everyone's surprise, Gwendolyn became pregnant within the year. The pregnancy was difficult, her body was human, and the child she carried was not entirely so, but Mircea monitored her closely, and she made it through. Their daughter was born on a cold winter night, with white hair and dark eyes and a cry that echoed through the castle. They named her Petra, after the stone that had saved Gwendolyn's life, and from the moment Dracul held her, he was utterly, hopelessly besotted. Petra was followed by another daughter, Zara, 2 years later, and then by a son, Quillen, 3 years after that. Each child was a miracle, a blend of human warmth and vampire strength, and they grew up wild and loved in the castle that had once seemed so cold. Gwendolyn stepped back from her duties as gate warden as the children grew, passing the role to a younger woman who had the same fire and determination she had once had. She remained involved, advising and guiding, but her focus shifted to her family. Dracul, for his part, proved to be a devoted father. He was patient and gentle with the children, teaching them about their heritage and their responsibilities, and he loved them with a fierceness that took Gwendolyn's breath away. And through it all, he loved her. Even as her hair turned gray and her hands grew lined, even as her steps slowed and her body began to fail, he loved her with the same intensity he had on the night he had carried her inside. They had 43 years together. Not enough, never enough, but more than Gwendolyn had ever dreamed of when she collapsed at the castle gates. On the night she died, she was 81 years old, and she was surrounded by everyone she loved. Oliver and Helena were there, their own children grown and married. Petra, Zara, and Quillen were there, holding her hands and telling her they loved her. And Dracul was there, sitting beside her bed, his hand wrapped around hers. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "for everything, for carrying me inside, for loving me, for giving me this life." "It is I who should be thanking you," he said, and his voice was rough with grief. "You gave me hope when I had none. You reminded me what it meant to fight for something that mattered. You gave me a family and a purpose, and 43 years of happiness I did not deserve. I will carry you always, Gwendolyn, in here." He pressed a hand to his chest over his silent heart. "Always." She smiled, and then she closed her eyes, and she let go. 20 years later, on a warm summer night in the mountains, the castle hosted a wedding. Oliver's grandson was marrying the daughter of a minor baron, and it was a grand affair, with music and dancing and more wine than was strictly necessary. Dracul stood on the edge of the crowd, watching the festivities with the same quiet patience he had always had. He looked exactly as he had 43 years ago, white-haired and pale-skinned and ageless, but there was a warmth in his eyes that had not been there before Gwendolyn. Petra found him there, her own white hair pulled back in a braid, and she slipped her arm through his. "You should be dancing, Father. I am a terrible dancer. Mother never minded. Your mother was kind enough to overlook many of my flaws." Petra smiled. "She was, but she would want you to be happy, you know, even now." "I am happy. I have you and your siblings and your children. I have a kingdom that is better than it was, and laws that are just. I have the memory of 43 years with the most extraordinary woman I have ever known. How could I not be happy?" "You still miss her. Every day. But that is all right. Missing her means I loved her, and I would not trade that for anything." They stood together in silence, watching the dancers spin and laugh, and then Petra tugged on his arm. "Come on, one dance, for her." Dracul allowed himself to be led onto the dance floor, and he danced badly, just as he always had, but he danced with a smile on his face. And if he looked up at the stars and thought of a woman who had counted her steps in the snow, who had collapsed at his gates and changed his life forever, well, that was between him and the night. The debt of the gate still stood, carved into law and protected by the Warden who had succeeded Gwendolyn. The path through the mountains was still there, still dangerous, but now there were shelters along the way, and maps and guides for those who needed them. The castle gates stood open, welcoming rather than forbidding, and the ledger in the gate warden's office had new names written in it, proof that the debt was still honored. And in the tower room, with the view of the mountains, there was a plaque on the wall, simple and unadorned, with words that Dracul had carved himself. Here walked Gwendolyn Pierce, who proved that courage and love could change the world. May her memory be a blessing and a challenge to all who follow. The stars shone down on the castle, cold and distant and eternal, and the music played on into the night. Somewhere in the mountains, the snow fell soft and silent, covering the path that Gwendolyn had walked all those years ago. But the memory of her journey remained, etched into the stones and the laws and the hearts of everyone she had touched. And in the end, that was enough, more than enough. It was everything.